Bridget struggles with her alpha pride, refusing to admit weakness even as she's on the verge of collapse, while her pack's survival and her own hangs in the balance. What will it take to make her accept the help she desperately needs?
𝐿𝐵2.
I saw Bridget wince as Jasmine helped set her down on Tristan's bed. You really shouldn't be up. Jasmine spoke looking half concerned and half angry. Bridget waved her off as she lifted her legs onto the bed as well. It was so obvious that she was in pain, not just from her facial expressions but from her looks in general. She had taken on an ashy gray color. I was no doctor, but that was clearly not good at all. I found one, Peter announced as he walked into the room with one of those automated wheelchairs. Lady Melrose was behind him. Bridget stared at the contraption. I'm not using that, she spoke in disgust. Like hell you aren't. Peter spoke, and I don't think I had ever seen him so authoritative. Bridget turned her blue eyes on him. You can barely walk, Jasmine pointed out. I will not be seen as an invalid, Bridget argued. The alpha is a symbol of power. Oh, give me a break. Lady Melrose spoke as she walked towards the bed. And you think you'll be seen as weak for wanting help? Do yourself a favor, dear, and stop acting like a man. Peter and Raphael shared a look as if trying to decide whether or not they were offended. Bridget clenched her jaw. I don't know who else could be a mole. If there still is one or two, the first thing they'll report to 𝐿𝐼𝐧𝐼 is that I am in a wheelchair. He'll attack in seconds. Let him. Jasmine scoffed. My dad and his army will back you up, and so will the other packs. I can't ask the other packs to send in their men so soon. Bridget spoke as she tried to adjust her position. May rushed forward to place a pillow behind her. This is Tristan, Jasmine argued as she balled up her fists. You don't think I know that? Bridget snapped. For the first time I saw the emotion in her eyes, and I can't believe that I had forgotten for even a second how much Tristan meant to Bridget. If anything, there wasn't a soul alive better equipped to get him back. Or another soul better equipped to take care of what he had left behind, his pack, his brothers, me. That's the only reason I believed I was still here. Bridget was honoring Tristan in every way possible. It's the only reason I had survived that witch hunt back at HQ. Because let's face it, Bridget hadn't suddenly started caring about me. Bridget sucked in a deep breath. We can't think with our emotions here. We have to be smart like Tristan would have been. 𝐿𝐼𝐧𝐼 knows what he was doing when he took Tristan. Otherwise, why not just have Roman kill him then and there? I gulped as I remembered Roman's part in all of this. What had I been thinking? That he would comply like a good little boy and everything would be okay again. That he had something redeemable still in him. He's playing mind games. Raphael growled. That's 𝐿𝐼𝐧𝐼. He's a sadistic bastard. So how do we get around that? How do we beat him at his own game and get Tristan back? I heard the panic in Jasmine's eyes before I saw her face. Again, I was underestimating how much Tristan meant to everyone in this room. How far they were willing to go for him. We don't. Bridget spoke, looking at the wall opposite her with a straight face. We don't because we're not playing 𝐿𝐼𝐧𝐼's game. Raphael folded his hands across his chest and looked at her attentively. In fact, everyone was, and once again Bridget was proving that she was a born leader. He wants our first instinct to be to go for Tristan, to negotiate for him. If Captain Park was his informant, she would know how much any of the likely next alphas loved Tristan. How much we would all want him back. Bridget was right, me, her, Joshua, Mike, and Lady Melrose. If any of us had taken up the title of alpha, the first thing we would do was try to get him back. So what are you saying we don't get Tristan back? May asked in worry. No. Bridget spoke immediately. She's saying we have to beat 𝐿𝐼𝐧𝐼 at his own game. Raphael spoke quietly. He looked thoughtful. I worked special ops during the war. I know how to get in, infiltrate enemy camps without getting caught. Bridget nodded at him. That will come in handy, but not for Tristan. Because our main goal isn't his retrieval right now. What? My voice was the loudest and everyone seemed to just realize I was present. Bridget gave me a sharp look. Going for Tristan is what he expects. He's ready for that. So we're just going to leave him there. I argued. All I had heard were terrible things about the Shadow Pack. And now that Tristan was in their hands, I couldn't imagine what they were doing to him. They could have already killed him. Bridget spoke, trying to make her voice monotonous, but I could see right through the emotion she was trying to disguise. I saw Jasmine look at the ground and shut her eyes tightly. We could send our best in, but believe me, 𝐿𝐼𝐧𝐼 will be waiting. He knows our moves too well. I was at a loss of words. All the energy I had depleting. She of all people couldn't be giving up on Tristan. Then we devise another plan. I spoke desperately. Something that will catch him off guard and get Tristan back. 𝐻𝐼𝐬𝐧𝐰 has thrown the first punch. Bridget spoke forcefully. He has initiated this war and he wants us to fight fire with fire. That's the very thing Tristan was dreading. I'm not sending our soldiers blindly into a war that 𝐻𝐼𝐬𝐧𝐰 has obviously been preparing years for. Raphael sighed. He has Captain Park on his side. I don't know how long he has her, but either way he knows our manpower, our weaponry, our strategy. You're right, we can't win this one if we play directly into his arms. Then find a way to win. Lady Melrose spoke up. She got to her feet and straightened her scarf. My grandson is out there. And that bastard 𝐻𝐼𝐬𝐧𝐰 is probably torturing him as we speak. Find a way to win, and when you're done I want his head. I can do my best, but at this point we also have to consider seniority. Bridget spoke. She looked at Jasmine. Your dad is leader of the union right now. This isn't just a 𝐿𝐵𝐼𝐬𝐧𝐰 pack issue. All the werewolf union packs have a say in how to handle 𝐻𝐼𝐬𝐧𝐰. Lady Melrose placed a hand on her hip. Then tell him I demand my grandson back. I don't care who freaking sits at the head of that table. I want Tristan back. She sounded surprisingly calm, which made things even more scary as she turned to leave the room, but not before giving me a small nod that was very easy to translate. Make it happen. We heard the door close behind her. I'll gladly do the decapitation myself. Raphael spoke. Bridget sighed. No suicide missions, guys. I mean it. Suicide and willing to die for our alpha are two different things. Peter spoke. Bridget looked exhausted, and I wasn't just saying that because of her appearance. She looked drained. Listen, everyone. She spoke as she looked around. You are the only people I can still trust. That's why you're in this room. Bridget's eyes met mine, but only for a second before she looked away. I blinked. Did she really mean that? Did she count me in as one of her trusted people? That's why I'm going to be honest with you about everything. Tristan has been taken. I don't know what 𝐻𝐼𝐬𝐧𝐰 plans on doing to him. Whether he wants to keep him alive and torture him or torture us by having us not know what will happen. I refuse to be a pawn in his game or let anyone else be. We're going to take down 𝐻𝐼𝐬𝐧𝐰 and we'll make sure he doesn't see it coming. But for now, Jazz, Raph, I need you to secure this pack. Nothing but thorough filtration through the walls. Form a barricade if you need to. The town is going into lockdown. Make sure all the residents have what they need. The only people I want still patrolling should be my soldiers, and if any suspicious activity is detected, I want it reported to me immediately. Raphael and Jasmine nodded. They then shared a look of mutual understanding. Whatever you say, Alpha. Raphael spoke. I'll get 𝐿𝐼𝐬𝐧𝐰 and the rest. 𝐿𝐼𝐬𝐧𝐰 stays with the twins. I want them guarded at all times. We're not losing any more Melroses. Bridget spoke. Raphael nodded slowly and somberly. It was a heavy and sad thought that so many of Tristan's family had been lost to 𝐻𝐼𝐬𝐧𝐰, and it was now possible that more could be lost as well. Pete. Bridget spoke in a more level voice. From now on you have to be my correspondent. You have a way with words. I need you to communicate with the pack what's going on in a way that won't raise panic. Peter scoffed. No disrespect, Bridge, but I'm a trained fighter, not a mouthpiece. I want to help. Bridget gave me a quick look. She had been so quiet that I had almost forgotten she was here. I get that, but your job is important too. You won't just be a messenger. You'll be the link between me and the rest of the alphas and the council. Peter pursed his lips. He studied Bridget as if not completely believing her. I looked at May and couldn't help but wonder if Bridget didn't want Peter in the action because she was protecting both her friends. May from worrying and Peter from getting hurt or worse, killed. I can't just be a glorified secretary while everyone puts their lives on the line, Bridge. I'm your alpha, Peter. You will do what I tell you to. Bridget was in no state to be putting up such a fight, but she definitely tried. Peter clenched his jaw. Okay, Alpha. He spoke before turning to leave. May sighed as she looked after him. Bridget nodded at her. Go. Talk to him. May complied as she turned in that very direction, but she then paused and looked at Bridget with folded arms. Bridge, as much as I don't want him on the front lines, you know he isn't going to stop. Pete can be almost as stubborn as you. Yeah, well, I'm alpha, so he has to listen to me. She spoke. May let out a light sigh. She shook her head slightly before turning to leave, giving me a small nod in the process. I pushed myself forward. This is ridiculous. I spoke. What exactly is ridiculous? Bridget asked slowly and calmly. I let out a huff. Tristan is out there and we're not. I spoke. I was aware that I wasn't sounding eloquent or powerful. It wasn't exactly giving Luna. And honestly, if I had been the one to take over, I'm pretty sure the whole pack would have been doomed. I already told you you're trying to be smart because you think that's what Tristan would want. I spoke, moving closer to her. But I don't really care about what Tristan would want right now. I just want him safe and sound and with the people he loves. Crystal. I already made it clear that outsmarting 𝐿𝐼𝐻 is next to impossible. Then let's not outsmart him. I spoke. Use me. Some of the council members had a point. You can use me as a bargaining chip. Bridget was silent for a second and I was scared that she would just shut me down again. You think I haven't considered that? She spoke in a lower voice. I was shocked. I know it had been my idea, but I guess I hadn't really been expecting it to have been crossing Bridget's mind as well. She got to her feet. Something I didn't think was a good idea. She just looked paler. Her blonde hair sticking to her face. It's immoral and horrible, and I know Tristan would hate me for it, but yes, Crystal, I did consider using you as a bargaining chip for Tristan. I swallowed. Her voice was low and weak, but I was still afraid. Do you know why I haven't? Because I love Tristan and he loves me. And you and this entire pack. Even if we used you to get him back, do you think he would ever be happy again? I thought of me begging Tristan not to challenge 𝐿𝐼𝐻 and how he had been so determined. For Tristan, it had never been about himself. It had been about Joshua and Mikey and his grandmother. About his parents' legacy and his friends and his pack. And me. He was the most selfless man I knew, and of all people he didn't deserve this. I'm not gonna stop trying. Yeah, well, I don't expect you to, princess. Bridget muttered. She clutched her side as she limped to Tristan's dresser. She stared at a framed picture of his parents. Bridget. I started slowly. Are you dying? Bridget turned to me, flinching slightly in pain and the small action. She was using the dresser for support. What do you think? She asked. I stared at her hands that didn't look strong enough to do anything. Poison usually requires an antidote. She muttered. I frowned. My mother had been poisoning me slowly with the very poison that had been meant to hurt Tristan. Bridget had taken the bullets for him. And the effects were showing. You were in a coma. I told her. How did you wake up? The corners of Bridget's lips turned down. She looked away from me. I felt him sever our link. Bridget spoke quietly. I had almost forgotten that Bridget and Tristan's minds had been linked. It gave me the shock I needed to get back up. She explained. I frowned. The rejection had been one of the most painful things I had ever experienced. I could somehow relate to what Bridget was going through. Wait. I spoke, realization hitting me. If Tristan is alive, I think I know how to get in touch with him. Bridget looked at me in confusion. How? I'm his mate. I spoke, never being so happy to say that. We can link minds. 𝐿𝐼𝐻 is still going to kill him. My eyes fluttered open and I became very aware of the pounding in my head. It felt like someone had hit me with a sledgehammer. I tried to move but soon realized that my hands were chained to the floor while my legs were chained together. I looked down at my torn up and blood-stained t-shirt. Because that's not the plan. Tristan needs to stay alive. I looked up and found the sources of the voices. There was a woman facing away from me. She was tall and had a slender figure. She had a big fro which extended to her shoulders. I blinked and focused on the person she was talking to. It would take a long time for me to forget Roman's voice or stance. I thought the plan was to take out the alpha 𝐿𝐼𝐻 said. Once that was done, he could reclaim Silvercrest. David. 𝐿𝐼𝐻 doesn't have to explain his ways to anyone. You just have to be patient and see what he does like the rest of us. There was silence from both of them for a second. He's keeping you in the dark too, isn't he? David, he still wants Crystal. And you know him, he won't stop till he gets her. If Tristan is still alive when that happens, she's gonna try and save him. And how do you think that will go for her? Are you really going to lecture me on how I should take care of my daughter, David? I heard the woman snap. I flinched. The pounding in my head made it hard to see or think. But it was clear who they were talking about and I didn't have to guess to know who the woman was. I'm worried. I heard Roman say. And I told you don't worry about it. I have everything handled. More silence. What is it? Crystal's mother asked. Meggy's ex. I shifted slightly, causing the chains to make a clinking sound. The woman turned around as both her and Roman turned their attention to me. I saw Teresa Benson's face come into view. A face that I had only seen in pictures thus far, but I would still recognize it anywhere because of the similarities to Crystal. Roman came up behind her. "There you are." The woman spoke as she crouched down. Crystal's face was more round and I felt like it made her features look softer. Teresa's face was longer and her features were more striking, I guess. More intimidating. But nonetheless it was easy to tell that she was definitely her daughter. "Tristan Melrose." She spoke. The words played on her lips as she studied me in interest, watching me carefully. "For what?" "I didn't know. I've been dying to meet you," she continued. I let out a cough and winced as the small action intensified the throbbing in my head. "Wish I could say the same," I spat. Teresa smiled as if she was amused. "I see my daughter has a thing for the sharp-tongued men as well." She got back to her feet. I saw Roman roll his eyes. "Crystal has actual taste," he spoke. Now don't be jealous, David." Teresa spoke. She walked to the side as if she wanted to see me from another angle. I saw her fold her arms across her chest. "Jealous of him?" Roman, or should I say David, scoffed. "I've always been amused by the frailty of men's egos." Teresa spoke with a smirk. "My daughter sure knows how to pick them. The daughter you abandoned." I let out my voice coming out through gritted teeth. It just occurred to me that maybe I should have been panicking more. I didn't know where I was. From what I could tell, it was a dilapidated room with stone walls which were unpainted. No windows and one door. I couldn't hear anything outside. I had nothing to give me a clue on my location. My body was in pain and my head felt like it was about to explode. Teresa looked at me. The look is something I should have definitely been frightened of, but I just stared back. Narrowing my eyes, she walked over to me, her leather boots hitting the floor. She crouched down again, this time close enough that her face was inches away from me. She suddenly pulled on the chain around my neck, roughly yanking my face closer to her. I let out a yell. "Listen to me, Tristan Melrose, you don't know me, or what I'm capable of. My baby girl might have a soft spot for you, but that doesn't make you safe." She let go of the chain, giving me a push so that I fell back, hitting my head against the stone wall. I winced. I definitely felt that one in my skull. Teresa walked to where Roman was standing before turning back to me. "You've been captured, Alpha. I'm sure you're well versed with the rules of war to know that this means the Shadow Pack has ground to determine victory. Your pack will have to choose a replacement, Alpha. And whoever that person will be has the option of relenting or keeping up the war effort. But I can promise you 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐬 will get them and kill them as well." I gritted my teeth. I wouldn't give either of them the satisfaction of knowing how much pain I was in. When there was a power vacuum, there was a select group of people who were eligible to take the Alpha's spot. My beta would have been an obvious choice, but that was a non-starter. Other family members. Ideally Mikey or Joshua or even my grandmother. There was also the chief of my army, Captain Park. The freaking traitor. And of course, does that include Crystal? The look Teresa gave me was enough to let me know that I had definitely hit a nerve. She shot me a murderous look. I saw Roman try to keep a straight face, but from how his expression faltered slightly, I could tell that it had to do with the conversation I had just overheard. Teresa's hard look melted and she smiled. "Bold of you to try and play mind games with me, Alpha. Looking at the position you're in right now, you really should be more careful with someone who has the keys to your life." I watched Teresa. "Am I to believe you're the one pulling the strings here?" Teresa folded her arms across her chest. "If you want to see 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬 that badly, all you have to do is ask." She cocked her head to the side, grinning. "Unfortunately for you, he's a little preoccupied at the moment." I fought the urge to scoff. I'm sure the bastard was somewhere plotting the perfect death for me. It must have been poetic for him in some sick way to get to kill 3 generations of Melroses. I looked at Teresa, then Roman. "You both proudly serve a man who readily murders and tortures innocents. A man who wishes to enslave the world." I had learned 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬's twisted manifesto when I was a boy. He didn't agree with the Werewolf Union's pledge of secrecy. He wanted humans to find out about us. He considered himself superior. He considered all werewolves superior. It's the basic law of nature. Roman spoke. "We're faster and stronger. We're the dominant species," he explained. So that gives you the right to rule over others? I asked in disgust. The problem with you is that you have always been so small-minded. He told me, the idea isn't to enslave humans. We just want to establish ourselves as the superior species. I let out a laugh. It seemed to infuriate Roman. You're an idiot if you think that's all 𝐿𝐼𝐻 plans to do. You were in my AAP, you learnt about tyrants. About men who consider themselves gods. They want people to bow to them. They want to be worshipped. That's what 𝐿𝐼𝐻 wants. He wants to rule over everyone. He wants to control them. Roman stepped forward. All your AAP ever did was spread lies about the Shadow Pack. The pack you and the entire Union labeled as the enemy. You shunned us, exiled us. We could have died out. I could see the anger in Roman's eyes as he moved closer. I kept my jaw tightened. So sorry, Alpha, but your little attempt at converting us isn't going to work. It's a little too late for all of that. I knew that my chances of getting out of here alive were slim to none, but I sure as hell wasn't going down without taking or at least trying to take 𝐿𝐼𝐻 down. The bastard just needed to show his face and I needed to convince him to duel me. That probably wouldn't be too hard considering his naturally violent nature. His pride also probably wouldn't let him back off. The only thing that hurt was that I wouldn't get to see Crystal again. Now boys, Teresa spoke, we're not here to indoctrinate each other. She looked at Roman and nodded. We're here to get your official surrender. Surrender Alpha Tristan and your people will be spared. I looked at Teresa. You honestly expect me to believe that? 𝐿𝐼𝐻's very nature bred violence. He hated my pack especially and what we stood for. And I was supposed to believe that all I had to do was kiss his ass and my people would be safe. A noble leader would look out for his own people first. Roman spoke. I looked at him in disgust. You're one to talk about nobility. You paraded in my pack as a spy. Lied to everyone around you including the girl you claim to love. I love Crystal more than you ever will, jackass. He spat at me. Teresa held him back. Don't let him get to you, David. She hissed. She looked him in the eye. You know better. Roman relaxed and stepped back. But his glare on me never ceased. I smiled to myself, which seemed to infuriate him more. Teresa breathed a small sigh. Your answer, Alpha Tristan. I looked at her. They looked alike, but that's where the resemblance ended. My people will never bow down to 𝐿𝐼𝐻. I spat. I turned to look at Roman. And even if I die, at least it will be with the knowledge that I was the one Crystal loved in the end. Roman's face darkened even more. I leaned against the wall and shut my eyes. An indication that I was done talking. Tell 𝐿𝐼𝐻 that if he wants to ask me something he should come his damn self. I heard Teresa let out another breath. So be it. David, let's go. I heard footsteps. When I opened my eyes, I was alone again in the dim room. After what felt like some hours had passed, I heard the sound of heavy chains. I looked up to see two guards walking in, this time dragging a girl. I immediately recognized her. In spite of the cuts and bruises on her face that almost disfigured her. It was Meggy, one of the rogues I had captured. She was thrown onto the floor a few feet away from me. She groaned weakly. The guards attacked her chains to the ones of the walls like they had me before turning to leave. I turned to look at her. Her head rolled back in a way that looked like she had no control over it. But she soon turned and found my eyes. Alpha Tristan. She muttered. There was no particular emotion on her face or in her voice when she said my name. I know she had been in a bad state with the way we were keeping her in the prisons, but if it's possible, she looked even worse. I narrowed my eyes at her. Her clothes were torn and bloody as well. Her limbs lay limp beside her. Why did they do this to you? I asked, wondering why they would hurt their own in such a way. Or imprison her. Meggy looked at me with hatred. Some of her short hair was flying wild while the rest stuck to her face with blood. I told you I wasn't freaking working for 𝐿𝐼𝐻. She spoke bitterly. I pursed my lips. She had said that her and the other rogues we had captured with her were part of some resistance. Of course I didn't believe them. I knew all Shadow Pack members to be raised to be loyal to 𝐿𝐼𝐻 and the Van Cleef family. Meggy tried to turn her head, but she didn't seem to have enough strength to do so. Or maybe she was just in too much pain. And now has killed all my family and my friends. She muttered, looking off into nothing. A pang of guilt hit me. I opened my mouth not knowing what to say. My mother had always told me to follow my instinct. And my instinct had told me not to trust a single Shadow Pack wolf. She had infiltrated my pack, come after my Luna, but didn't try to hurt her. I looked at Meggy, too weak to do anything, in even worse of a state than I was. Crystal told me to speak to them, to use them for information by striking a deal. I had refused because I was convinced she would just dupe me, try to hurt my pack the way so many of her people had done in the past. But I was wrong. Don't feel bad. She spoke. She then let out a weak laugh. We're next. She let out a laugh again. But this time it got interrupted by a fit of coughs. When she recovered, she turned to me. I saw a ghost of a smile on her face. I just hope they kill you first so that I can watch. That will be enough justice for me. She seemed to muster all the strength she had left to say those words. I leaned against the wall and looked away, trying to ignore her. Alex, I'm happy for you. I wanted to practice saying it in the mirror as many times as I could, but I didn't know how I could mean it anymore. Roman had always wanted to join the AAP. And now he was in it, and I wanted to be happy for him, and I was at first, but now I was watching him work closely with Tristan, and I didn't know how to be okay with that. My phone beeped and I looked down at it where it sat on the bed. I walked over. I had a new message from an unknown number. Outback. You have 5 minutes. I immediately knew who it was. I sighed. I looked at myself in the mirror one more time before turning to rush out the room lest His Royal Highness chew me out for wasting his precious royal time. Crystal. Come color with me. Parker called when he saw me rush past the dining room. I paused briefly. Aunt Helen, who was seated at the table with her son going through some papers, looked up at me above her glasses curiously. In a minute, but I'm just gonna take out the trash. You're not in trash duty today. Aunt Helen spoke. I shrugged. Thought I'd give Kat a break. I lied, already backing away, hoping she wouldn't get too suspicious about my behavior. I grabbed the black bag and lifted it out the house. I stepped off the porch, walking around the house to the back. Silvercrest had more wood than actual livable areas. I don't think many humans would be able to live in such a place. Almost every house was in the middle, trees and forestry. The only places in proper view were the main town areas and the school. I dropped the trash bag in the main bin before rushing towards the back forest where the trees got thicker as you went deeper. The Benson house lay in a pretty central area, but that didn't mean there was much around us. Our closest neighbors were still a few miles apart. The main road was about 10 minutes away. I walked deeper quietly and slowly when I realized it was too silent. I tried to use my enhanced hearing to detect anything. Birds, small animals. But it was quite but for the wind blowing at the trees. And then I heard it. A loud thud and feet landing on the ground. I gasped and spun around. Tristan stood before me in a navy blue t-shirt and gray shorts. I told myself to calm down as he straightened. I folded my arms across my chest. You hide in trees now. Tristan didn't look the slightest but amused. He stared at me blankly. Why'd you call me? He asked. I shifted slightly. I rubbed my arm with the other one. Right. Rejected mate awkwardness. Of course I hadn't spoken to Tristan in a while. We weren't even supposed to be talking, but for some reason I always seemed to have a reason to call on him. And I just know he was getting tired of getting new burner phones. I sucked in a deep breath. I wanted to talk. Tristan looked at me, looking mildly disgusted. Could I blame him? This series of us always establishing it would be the last time we communicated, and me always calling him back because I still had something to say would be annoying enough for anyone. You look nice. I spoke. Honestly, I was just trying to play nice and be friendly. I still didn't know the proper way to address or talk to Tristan. Would this be our life now? Him looking at me like a stranger? Would we pretend to be strangers until it became true? Isn't that what I had wanted? I did reject the bond after all. But it's not like it made anything easier. Tristan had no sign of emotion on his face, but his voice clearly told me that his patience was wearing thin. Now I know you did not call me all the way here to tell me that. He sounded slightly angry. No. I sucked in a deep breath. No. I spoke firmly, remembering exactly why I had contacted him. And if anything, he didn't have the right to be mad. What are you doing, Tristan? I asked, letting out a breath. He raised his brows at me, expecting me to elaborate. Roman, the AAP. Why are you being so mean to him? I asked. Tristan let out a hearty breath. It took a few seconds for me to realize he was chuckling. A hollow, sarcastic chuckle. He looked up at me, shaking his head. You've got to be kidding me, that's why I'm here. I felt mad. He was laughing. I was serious and he found it funny. Well, yeah. He keeps talking about how the alpha is always on him and giving him a hard time. I spoke defensively. Roman wasn't one to complain. He had long since accepted that his Silvercrest life wouldn't be one filled with the luxury of fairness. But when he spoke about his treatment from Tristan, it made me sad that he felt victimized and bullied by someone who was supposed to be our leader. Someone who was supposed to be my mate. I know we weren't together and I definitely didn't know how the mating bond was even decided by nature or whatever. But still, I felt responsible for it. Especially since I believed the only reason Roman was getting this treatment was because of me. Well, it's a hard program. He shouldn't have applied if he knew he wouldn't be able to handle the pressure. Tristan spoke lazily. I narrowed my eyes at him. Why was he being so casual and nonchalant? Roman can handle it. I snapped back. But it's no secret that you're being too hard on him and singling him out. Honestly, Tristan. Could you be any more obvious? Don't you think people will get suspicious of our secret? Your secret? Tristan spoke quietly. I'm not hiding anything. He looked up at me, right into my eyes, and it felt like his green orbs were trying to piece mine with guilt. I shifted uncomfortably. And I'm not singling out your little boyfriend. Maybe if he stopped being so emotional and did the work. Oh my gosh, Tristan, stop it. I yelled in frustration. That was an obvious lie. All I'm asking is that you stop bullying Roman, that's all. Tristan shook his head. He looked like he was trying to gather up patience. I'm not bullying anyone. He spoke more angrily. Yes, you are. I argued in frustration. What makes you think that? Roman told me. I replied. Tristan let out another humorless and hollow laugh. Why would I bully him? Huh, Crystal? What do I have to prove? I opened my mouth but then closed it again. What was I gonna say? Because of me. I balled up my fists and urged myself to remain calm. Just knock it off, okay? I'm not gonna say it again. To my surprise, Tristan grinned lazily. He walked towards me slowly, deliberately. He stopped a few feet in front of me and folded his arms across his chest, accentuating his biceps. Or what? He asked, mocking me, challenging me. I could feel my blood boiling as I glared at him. You're unbelievable. I yelled before turning to leave. Tristan quickly caught up with me and took my hand in his, stopping me. I quickly looked down at the contact. I was alarmed by the sensation. It felt like I was burning just by him touching me. I don't know if he felt it too, but he quickly let go. He looked away from me. I'm not bullying your baby boyfriend. He spoke gruffly. I swallowed. He seems to think so. I spoke in a low voice. Roman wouldn't just complain about Tristan if there was nothing to complain about. Tristan let out a huff. Listen, if you want me to back off, I will. But I don't treat Roman any differently from everyone else. The AAP is supposed to be tough. Like everything else here. I snapped. Tristan was quiet. It's only when I looked up at him that I saw him watching me. What do you mean by that? He asked, his tone not angry or sarcastic or anything but serious. I could say a lot about how I had been bullied, about how the curriculum was so different, or how I had been put in a baby P class. I was an athlete by any means, but come on. I was so frustrated by everything that was going on. A lot has changed for me since I moved here, okay? I spoke in a whisper. It's a lot different from living with humans. Tristan's face seemed to soften. He looked at the ground. If you want, I can talk to Headmaster Forbes. He can talk to the teachers. They can take it easy on you or give you some extra lessons if you want. I looked up at Tristan and blinked. It never really occurred to me that my mate was basically the mayor or president around here. My soulmate was the most powerful guy around these parts. The only power my last boyfriend ever had was that he got free tickets at the movie theater he worked at. I could probably get anything I wanted for free if I just asked. And once again, when I looked at Tristan, I wondered why I had been chosen for him. No. I spoke. I can work harder to bring up my grades. I spoke. I couldn't do much to change my physical inability, but studying. I could study. A few months ago, I didn't even know this place existed. I muttered as I looked around. Tristan nodded slowly. He placed a hand in his pocket. Maybe if you did. He trailed off, not finishing his sentence. He then cleared his throat and straightened. That's all, I should go. I looked at him, his mood had clearly changed. He turned to start walking away. Maybe if I had known. Maybe if I had known we would have had a chance. Art. I yelled in frustration before getting to my feet. I ran my hand through my hair as I started pacing. She failed. Again. Bridget spoke, sounding extremely unimpressed. She sat on a chair on the other side of Tristan's room. Jasmine stood beside her watching me. She had a slight frown on her face and I couldn't tell if it was sympathy for me, or if she just thought I was extremely pathetic. I stopped and looked at Bridget. One more try, I pleaded. Bridget leaned over in the chair, putting her head in her hand. She had gotten really good at not flinching every time she did that, which I found extremely impressive considering she wasn't starting to look any better. If anything, she was looking worse. Maybe we should take a break. Get some rest, Jasmine suggested. Every minute we spend not trying to contact Tristan is a minute more 𝐿𝐻𝐼𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐝 could be torturing or hurting him. I spoke. Bridget reached out for Jasmine to help her get to her feet. She had been practicing walking on her own, but I knew it was coming with a lot of pain. So as long as people outside the immediate circle weren't around, she asked for help. Jasmine helped her to her feet. Bridget looked at me. And ever minute I spend watching all your failed attempts to contact him is time I could be spending preparing my pack for war. Which is what's going on in case I have to remind you. I deflated. I turned to look at the spot on the carpet I had been sitting and trying to meditate to see if I could open my mind to Tristan. It was supposed to be nearly impossible. But not for mates. Especially if those mates were the Alpha and Luna. I have a meeting with my army commanders. Bridget spoke gruffly. You can stay here and keep trying. I had been trying. But I didn't even know the first thing to do. I had heard about opening your mind to someone and forming a mind link, but I had never really thought about ever doing it myself. Not even with Roman, even though there were many times I wished I could read his mind. I knew the link required a certain level of intimacy, and I was starting to fear that I just never truly established that with Tristan. I'm just trying to help and do my part. I called after Bridget. Her and Jasmine stopped. Jasmine turned to me. I could tell she was tired as well. She was working just as hard as Bridget to make sure the chaos that was about to hit wouldn't be too hard. When I saw Jasmine and Peter and Bridget, I was filled with a kind of admiration. They all seemed so wired and joined in all this. Even though Bridget had Peter taking on a different role from what he wanted, I could tell they were all working so hard to avoid what Tristan had always dreaded the most. He wasn't here yet, they were working like they got orders from him directly. And that kind of friendship is something I never really noticed Tristan had. All this time when I would think about Tristan, I pictured an elusive guy. Some king in a castle that I wasn't allowed into. He had always seemed so unattainable, that even when I felt the bond for the first time, I had believed that it was some kind of scam that couldn't be true. Until we kissed. Tristan had been within arm's reach all this time, but only had been in my arms for a short while. I hadn't truly gotten to love him the way I had feared, and now I was beginning to think I might never. Well, it's too bad the whole pack hates you. Bridget spoke. Ouch. Bridge. Jasmine scolded. I should have been more hurt, but it's not like that wasn't something I didn't already know. Bridget sighed. I just mean 𝐿𝐻𝐼𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐝 sent an entire video announcing you as his kin. You already have a bad track record with Roman, and now Tristan's gone. She paused. The waters are still now, but you should keep your head low and not stir anything up lest we have a riot. I'm not stirring anything up, I argued. I just want to help. Bridget rolled her eyes. What are you gonna do, Crystal? I couldn't say anything and she knew it. Because really there was nothing I could do. I didn't have their training. I had grown up around humans. It was a different ballgame altogether. The one thing I could do wasn't working. I felt so useless in all this. But I just wanted to find him. I just wanted him back. I thought so. Bridget spoke. Jasmine gave me a sympathetic look before turning to leave with Bridget. I sighed and sunk down onto the carpet. I buried my face into my hands. All I wanted to do was scream out in frustration. But that wouldn't do anything to help. I looked up when I heard the door creak open. I saw Nana Francesca walk in. I couldn't hide my shock upon seeing her. I quickly scrambled to my feet. I knew that Bridget had ordered her transfer back to the manor for safety reasons, but I guess I hadn't expected her to seek me out. I didn't know where I stood with Lady Melrose since the night of the ball when it was revealed that Tristan and I hadn't actually been true mates. I could imagine that kind of lie hadn't exactly given me points in her books. which I hated to be honest because Lady Melrose was one of the few people who had been on my team. Lady Melrose, hi. I didn't know what else to say in the moment. The elderly lady looked around my room as if scrutinizing it. It's not like I had done much or anything actually to change it since I moved in. She then turned back to me. Dindy pursed her lips. There are two things I absolutely cannot stand in this life, Crystal. She started sternly. I flinched even though she hadn't even said anything damaging yet. Her tone itself spoke volumes. That's liars and traitors. She stepped up to me, her form seemed stiff and her demeanor unforgiving. I wanted to open my mouth and say something, but I realized that this would go a lot better if I didn't, and just let her get whatever it was off her chest. I seem to be surrounded by both lately. She continued. I sucked in a deep breath and looked at the ground as I waited for the final blow. Captain Park was one of my oldest friends. She spoke. I looked back up at Lady Melrose. Huh. She walked over and sat down on my bed. It's then that I realized that for the first time in my life, I was seeing Lady Melrose not put together. Her usually shiny hair looked dry and was let loose to her shoulders, reminding me that the silver in her hair represented so many years that she had been on this earth. Her face seemed droopy and tired. I studied the woman, for the first time truly acknowledging that she had lost a husband, a daughter and now possibly a grandson to 𝐊𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐑𝐿. Back then a lot of people didn't believe a woman should head security. I vouched for her. Freaking traitor. I got her to where she was. I made sure she was respected in my husband's regime. I watched Lady Melrose not knowing if I should say anything. The elderly woman didn't even seem to be talking to me per se. If anything, it felt like she was just trying to sort out her thoughts and I just happened to be there. I've never been one to trust easily. She continued. But I trusted her. It was so clear that she was beyond hurt by this betrayal. I didn't know where to move closer to offer comfort or not. In the end, I decided to stay put. Do you know why she could have done it? Captain Park was a decorated army general. She had been beside 3 generations of alphas. Why she had chosen to be disloyal now boggled my mind, and I could tell it had left a lot of Tristan's people just as shocked. Lady Melrose looked me right in the eye and shrugged. I don't know. Power, I suppose. Greediness is the most poisonous thing you come across when you want to get to the top. Trust me, I was Luna. I saw it all the time around the men and women who surrounded my husband. She paused a bit. Is that why you pretended to love my grandson, Crystal? She asked. I was taken aback by the question. She didn't even seem mad. If anything, the question was so monotonous it carried no emotion. This time I did move forward. Lady Melrose. I wasn't pretending to. I sucked in a deep breath. She had been there when I had said this in the meeting to elect the new alpha, but I guess I hadn't told the whole story. It was pretend at first. Tristan claimed me to protect me. But I promise. I walked up to her and surprised even myself by getting on my knees so that I could look her in the eye. I didn't care what majority of Woodfell thought, but I cared what she did. She had accepted me from the beginning. Halfling and all. She had vouched and rooted for me. It's only now that I realized I had been very wrong in not giving her of all people an explanation. I didn't realize how much I did love Tristan. I don't know, maybe it was because Roman was in the picture or because of the necklace of because I was scared, but I spent a long time fighting and resisting the bond. Time I truly regret. But I promise you, I have never had any bad intentions when it came to being close to Tristan. Lady Melrose was quiet. She stared blankly at me and for a moment I wondered if she had even heard me. I know. She finally spoke. I looked up at her. She knew. Well then why was I on my knees? Please child, you really think you could have fooled me? You're as cunning as a cow. I would have seen you coming a mile away. I looked at her not knowing whether to be offended or not. Lady Melrose lifted her head and I once again remembered that even though she wasn't her usual put-together self, she was still Silvercrest royalty. Get up. She tugged on my hands, bringing me up from the floor to sit beside her. I looked at her, but she was still looking straight ahead as if I wasn't there. Everyone thinks I'm old and weak now. Jean had guards tailing me all the time. Tristan too. They both always wanted me supervised and watched like some fragile old lady. Tristan just wanted you safe. I spoke. I couldn't speak for his mother, but I knew how much Tristan cared about his family. Lady Melrose scoffed. Tristan and his mother were both self-righteous fools. They both had this inbred need to save the world, thinking it was their destiny. What crap. I had long since thought I had gotten over getting shocked by what Lady Melrose said. But apparently not. They didn't get it from me, I'll tell you that. She spoke. If I hadn't married Trevor and become Luna, believe me, I would still be able to afford a yacht and private jet out there. Wait, Silvercrest had yachts and private jets. Lady Melrose suddenly became sad. But my mate just had to turn out to be the hero type. I told Trevor when Lucien murdered all those alphas that he didn't have to continue fighting. That he didn't need to be brave and stupid. She sighed. But I should have known he'd never listen. He formed the Union instead. He started this whole chain. The Van Cliffs versus the Melroses. If he hadn't blatantly stood against them, he wouldn't have been such a huge target. But if he hadn't done what he had done, the Silvercrest pack probably wouldn't exist. I spoke. None of the other Union packs would have existed. The Van Cliffs would have won. Or maybe some other unfortunate block would have decided to play the hero. Lady Melrose spoke. Maybe someone else would have risen up. Ever think of that? There's an abundance of good in the world, Crystal. Maybe some other sucker would have led the revolution, the Calhounds and their lazy butts maybe. My husband wouldn't have had to die a martyr. My daughter wouldn't have felt the obligation to honor him and suffer the same fate. My grandson, she chalked on her words. I put my hand on her shoulder feeling like it was the right thing to do. We'll get Tristan back. I didn't know whether to believe my words. But I just didn't know what would become of me if I didn't. How? She snapped at me. How are you bloody going to do that? I tried not to be offended by her outburst. Nana Francesca was hurting. I don't know. I admitted. Bridget's words echoed in my head. What could I do? But I won't stop trying. Promised her. Lady Melrose stood up. She smoothed over her blouse. You better hope so, dear. She spoke seeming more composed. The first time I met you, I told you that these people couldn't touch you because you were their queen. Well, that's not going to be the case when they realize their alpha might not be coming back. She turned away without another word, leaving me feeling more exposed than I had before. The nightmare this time was more gruesome than before. This time I saw Onyx and he was in a dark room with Tristan. He morphed into a huge scary beast and devoured him right before my eyes. I shot up in a cold sweat, breathing heavily. When I looked out the window, I realized it was raining. I rushed towards the open window and shut it, locking it in the process. My heart was still trying to remember how to beat properly when I got back into bed. I looked at the digital clock beside me. It was 2 in the morning. I tossed and turned in bed. I heard thunder and the rain become harsher as the drops beat against the window. I had never really minded storms. Hazel did though. Whenever the weather was this harsh, especially at night, she would make excuses to sleep in mine and Kat's room. Kat would always get irritated, but I guess I had never really minded. Before the Bensons, I had been an only child. Having 3 new siblings wasn't exactly something I had been opposed to, even if sharing a bed with Hazel meant no personal space whatsoever. I sighed as I thought about the Bensons. In a lot of ways they were my adoptive family, and they had taken me when they hadn't needed to. Not only that, they had welcomed me with open arms. I only came to realize how much I had taken that for granted as I lay in this bed alone. No Hazel to knock in the middle of the night and ask if she could join. Or Aunt Sarah peeking in to see if Kat and I were warm enough. I got out of bed, my feet guiding me more than my mind. I wouldn't be able to sleep if I tried. Not with all the nightmares my mind seemed to have in store. My feet guided me to Tristan's room. It might have been creepy, but all I wanted to do was be close to something that reminded me of him. Just being around his scent would be enough. When I got to the door of his room, I wasn't expecting to find it already open. My steps slowed when I heard the unmistakable sound of quiet sobbing. I walked to the edge of the door. I peeked in and saw a head of blonde hair seated on the bed, hunched over something. It was obvious it was Bridget. She held something in her hands, but I couldn't make out what it was. I don't think I'd be able to anyway. My mind was too busy processing that the almighty and powerful Bridget was bawling her eyes out. If this had been any other situation, I would have sworn it must have been some freak blip in the universe's order. Bridget could not have tears or be capable of shedding them, if anything. I could think of all the reasons why this sight before me defied nature in so many ways. But to be honest, all I wanted to do was walk into the room and sob with her. I tore my eyes away from Bridget before I indeed begun bawling. I wandered down the hallway fighting back my own tears. I didn't know why, but I found myself getting furious at Bridget. Why was she crying? Why was she crying? Was she giving up? Tristan wasn't dead. We were going to save him. We had to. So why was she crying? I found myself in the hallway that held the different framed photographs of Tristan and his family. My eyes fixed on a younger Tristan in his mother's arms. You're not dead. I whispered to myself. I'm not gonna let that happen. Promise.